Welcome to this edition of CBN News Showcase. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Charlene Aaron. Target has taken the side of transgender activists in the national debate over public restrooms.
The store now allows people to use whichever restroom or fitting room corresponds with their, quote, gender identity. Conservative groups like the American Family Association are calling for a boycott of the retail chain.
That's right. And one pastor says that boycotting isn't the answer. Heather Sells recently caught up with Reverend Samuel Rodriguez, president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference.
The fact of the matter is that I personally still believe it's wrong for a male, a physiologically defined male to step into a restroom where a 6-year-old little girl is there and that man to go. It's wrong. To me, it's just there are things that are still black and white.
Well, let me ask you about the bathroom issue since you brought it up. So what do you say to the transgender man who says, if I go into the women's bathroom, I am going to scare all those women and children?
I say to that transgender man, he should demand from Target and anyone else a unisex restroom. Let them accommodate. Just the Supreme Court accommodation laws from the 1960s and 70s, there's laws of accommodation. Will you accommodate? Let that business create a unisex restroom or a transgender restroom. Call it whatever you want. And I have gay family members and gay friends. They even say, wait a minute, this is not what we signed up for. We wanted gay marriage. We did not ever sign up for a male, a physiological male, to be able to step into a restroom with a 6-year-old girl. We never signed up for this. So they actually, I think if a survey would be taken, you would find out they oppose the idea. And what they would want is accommodation. Create a restroom. Here's male, here's female, here's unisex. That's the way we solve this. So we're not intolerant. We're accommodating the transgender reality. At the same time, we're not sacrificing the safety of children throughout America.
Now, related to this bathroom debate, of course, is the boycott issue. And there is debate within the Christian world on boycotts. What do you think? Should Christians boycott?
We're going to end up boycotting everything. I kid you not. I mean, from Target to Starbucks to name it. I get some pushback from Christians because I drink a certain coffee beverage from a certain establishment. And I get pushback all the time. You know, we love you, we love your message, but how can you be advocating? Isn't that hypocritical? If you would look down the line, there are very few businesses that are not somehow lined up or supporting or facilitating or accommodating some cultural dynamics that are germane to our reality in 2016. We're going to boycott the world. What are we going to boycott everything? At the end of the day, instead of cursing the darkness, whining about the darkness, complaining about the darkness, why not turn on the light? And that's my call. Let's be light. So let's go to Target and be light. Let's be light in Target, Starbucks, everywhere else. Let's be light and show the glory and the love and the light of Christ without ever sacrificing truth.
Studies show millennials are less religious than their parents ever were, and that's a cause for concern among many of America's leaders.
Our White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon takes a look at what it all means.
Despite our Judeo-Christian roots, fewer Americans are identifying as Christians, while the number of Americans with no religion is growing at a record pace. Pew Research first surveyed more than 35,000 Americans about their religious views in 2007, then repeated the study 7 years later. During that time, those who call themselves Christians dropped nearly 8%, driven by declines among mainline Protestant and Catholic congregations. Non-Christian faiths inched up ever so slightly, just over 1%. At the same time, though, Americans who say they're atheist, agnostic, or so-called religious nuns jumped by more than 6%, making the nuns now nearly 23% of the population. 3 Christian U.S. senators, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, recently talked about this change and the role faith plays in their jobs as elected leaders.
I've struggled in 22 years in public life for sort of how to be a religious person in the world that I'm in. And what I've decided is I should just be authentically who I am, and much like I would share that I'm interested in the Kansas City Chiefs or love baseball and camping, if I would share that, or if I would share that I'm married and have 3 children, why wouldn't I share the most important thing about me?
Oklahoma Senator James Lankford says the nation is becoming increasingly uncomfortable with expressions of faith.
I tell people all the time that faith is faith when it permeates every part of who you are. If your faith only matters to you on weekends, that's really not a faith, that's a hobby. And you can have a hobby, that's okay, but if it's a faith, it affects how I treat my wife, it affects how we treat each other, it affects how I drive, it affects how I interact with other people. It shouldn't be something that I hide because I was elected.
As people of faith and lawmakers work through these issues, the senators agree open dialogue is critical.
People will say you're either for religious liberty or you're for gay marriage. Or they'll say if you support religious liberty, then you're anti-gay. And they want to take that and just pull that apart. And that is factually not who we are, nor where we have been as a nation. And I think that is a very precarious road of constricting speech.
Putting people in a box, Langford maintains, silences people of faith and stops important conversations. With the growth in millennials choosing lives without faith, Senator Chris Coons worries about religious literacy among non-believers. He says an individual's right to exercise their religion must be on equal footing with individual liberty.
As long as we can continue to lift up the importance of individual religious free exercise, and that it deserves an equal footing with a civil society where we respect individual liberty, we're at least asking the right questions.
And fortunately, those best principles do show up in the research. Devout Christians are actually reading their Bibles, sharing their faith, and praying together more today than they did 7 years ago. Senator Kaine says we're blessed to live in a country where both sides can talk about these issues civilly. That keeps America as a beacon to parts of the world where there is no peaceful approach to separate religious beliefs. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
The decline of Christianity in Europe is also going to lead to major changes. Muslims will outnumber practicing Christians in Europe very soon. That's what the Justice Minister of Belgium told a committee of the European Parliament. He explained that it's not because there are too many Muslims, rather there are generally fewer practicing Christians. And the country's deputy prime minister added, quote, "The worst thing we can do is to make an enemy of Islam."
They are called the Yazidis, an ancient people who live mostly in the Nineveh province of northern Iraq. Their Muslim neighbors have persecuted them for centuries, and ISIS has been committing genocide against them since they took over their homeland. But one Christian group has been ministering to these people just a few kilometers from the ISIS front lines. Chuck Holton brings us the story from the Iraqi city of Sinjar.
Mount Sinjar made international headlines in 2014 when tens of thousands of Yazidis fled into these hills to escape ISIS, carrying little more than the clothes on their backs. It was midsummer, and hundreds died of thirst and exposure on the trek. Eventually, the world community came together to deliver water and food to those left stranded on the mountain. 2 winters have come and gone, and there are still thousands of Yazidis living in makeshift camps, while down below, Kurdish soldiers have established a perimeter around the city of Sinjar, which was held by ISIS for a year and a half. When they were finally pushed out last November, they left the city an uninhabitable ruin. Most Yazidis won't be able to return to Sinjar for years, if ever. But help is coming from an unlikely place, the country of Burma, also known as Myanmar. These Burmese Christians have come to Iraq to give aid and training to the Yazidis and the Kurdish army, and they understand persecution better than most. They belong to a group called the Free Burma Rangers. David Eubank is the founder.
For the past 20-plus years, we've been in Burma in the different conflict areas, sharing the love of Jesus, giving people help, and getting the news out. And then last year, we were invited here, and this is our 4th trip where we've come back to help the Kurdish people under attack by ISIS.
The Free Burma Rangers has made a name for itself, going into conflict zones around the world and helping the world's most vulnerable people. Dave's background and military experience made him uniquely prepared for this kind of ministry.
My background, growing up as a missionary kid in Thailand, hunting since I was very small, running around the jungle, also in the Rangers, and then later in Special Forces, all that enabled me to understand how do you function in a war zone? How can you help people? What's realistic? What's not realistic? What can you really do?
This trip, the Free Burma Rangers have been here for 6 weeks, spending time with frontline troops conducting training and providing medical care. They've also brought over $20,000 worth of donated warm clothing for the Yazidis living on top of Mount Sinjar. But Dave doesn't do this alone. He brings his wife and 3 children because they believe these Yazidi children can more easily relate to the gospel that way.
I have faith in God that He will protect me wherever I go and wherever our family goes. ISIS is a very strong force that needs to be stopped, and there are still women and children held captive by ISIS. Sinjar just mostly looks like rubble, and buildings have been destroyed and many have just been flattened.
We're driving through the city of Sinjar and starting to notice that there are civilians coming back in. Even just a second ago saw a shop that was open. People are kind of scavenging around through the ruins, picking up whatever they can find that's useful, and just starting the process of putting their lives back together. One of those families was fortunate that ISIS used their home as a headquarters, and so it wasn't destroyed. They've opened a bakery to sell bread to the soldiers who are guarding the city. As the first families start to come back into the shattered city of Sinjar, the FBR team is here conducting a Good Life Club and teaching these Yazidi kids that God's love is deep and wide. One man we met told us ISIS kidnapped his wife in 2014, and he hadn't heard from her until 3 days before this interview. She called to say she was being held in a prison in Ramadi and that ISIS was now asking for a ransom of $5,000. Before he could finish his story, his phone rang. It was his cousin, a 15-year-old boy, captured about the same time as his wife. The young man had been taken to an ISIS training camp in Syria and was pleading for help to escape. Everyone had thought he was dead. As ISIS is slowly being pushed out of Iraq, they're starting to try and ransom their captives back to their families. And despite the cost, these Yazidis are desperate to get their loved ones back.
What would you do if your wife was captured 2 years ago with your baby kids? What would you do, really? I think you would move heaven and earth to go save them. And that's what we need to do.
For the time being, Dave and his team are continuing to do what they can to shine the light of hope into a very dark place.
Oh, hello, infantry.
From Mount Sinjar, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
China's president is sounding the alarm against the spread of religion in the country. He recently commented about the need to guard against what he called infiltrations via religious means and warned that religious groups must submit to the ruling Communist Party's control. The speech comes as crosses and churches are being demolished in the eastern part of the country.
Meanwhile, a congregation in China is mourning the loss of a pastor's wife who was killed when she tried to stop the destruction of their church. The Christian agency that reported this atrocity says it's part of a larger crackdown against Christians in China. Meng Fei Li has the details.
The pastor and his wife stood in front of a bulldozer to keep it from destroying their church. That's when the demolition team leader ordered the driver to push them into the pit and bury them alive. The pastor escaped, but his wife died of suffocation. Local police say they're investigating the incident, and 2 members of the demolition team have been detained. Bob Fu heads the Christian human rights group China Aid. He said this shows that Chinese officials will go to extreme lengths to stop the spread of Christianity.
I think the government, under the massive corruption, and lack of legitimacy, and the social unrest, really try to look for a scapegoat. And unfortunately, the independent churches are becoming increasingly a target that the government blamed for political instability. And the rapid, massive growth of Christianity has been regarded as a political threat.
Ba Fu also mentioned what happened in Henan province was the most inhumane way from the Chinese government to control the growth of Chinese churches. The tension between the Chinese government and the Chinese Christian community is increasing dramatically as more churches will be demolished. China Aid says persecution in China jumped 150% in the past year, with nearly 3,000 Christians detained and about 1,300 to jail terms. Despite the opposition, Chinese Christians in the Henan province are pressing forward in their faith, inspiring others to persevere as well. Meanwhile, organizations like China Aid will continue the fight for religious freedom. Mengfei Li for CBN News.
Well, Mark, I think we can both agree that God can reach anyone, anywhere. Well, that certainly was the case with Charlie Mackesy. He was an atheist, an artist, and he hated religion.
But then God opened his eyes to the beauty all around him. John Jessup met up with Charlie in London to hear his remarkable story.
Charlie Mackesy has been described as a world-class artist, selling his artwork to the likes of Whoopi Goldberg and Sting.
When did you discover that you had artistic ability?
Good question. I mean, I think I probably knew that I could draw at school, but I think you need a reason to draw.
He found that reason about 25 years ago in a London park. An atheist at the time, he says he had a feeling that there must be more to this than meets the eye.
Jesus quietly introduced me to a journey into finding people really beautiful, which is how my art really began. Because I felt inside me, he was going, look how beautiful is that guy sitting on that bench. And I would never have noticed him before.
In this bronze sculpture called The Return of the Prodigal Son, Mackesy captures the raw emotion of that familiar parable. It's located here at Holy Trinity Brompton, one of the most influential churches in the Church of England.
Didn't believe any of it at all.
Mackesy is a popular speaker here, particularly with unbelievers.
Charlie appeals to people outside of the church because he's not what they expect. You know, when you have a sort of picture of the evangelist, you don't picture Charlie Mackesy.
So I decided that what I'd do is, I was in bare feet anyway, so I stood on the loo seat like this.
He can be a bit unorthodox, like the day he describes hearing a gospel song for the first time at a music festival inside a portable toilet that was so filthy he stood on the seat to avoid the overflow. The song pierced through his atheism, moving him to tears.
And he's very humble, very unpretentious. He tells stories against himself.
I didn't really know what happened to me, but as I was feeling it, my left foot slipped. And I went up to here.
While Mackesy's stories may not be for the faint of heart, he points out that those closest to Jesus, the disciples, could also be described as objectionable.
I realized that they were naughty people, unreligious people, people who didn't really have a religious etiquette, who probably wouldn't be that welcome in church. I thought Christianity was be clean, come to church, be nice, don't use the F word, and you'll be accepted and liked, because that's the thing, it's a meritocracy. And if you want to belong, be a certain way. And he says you're loved. You're loved as you are, covered in whatever it is, on the inside or out.
I think he's the finest evangelist in the UK at the moment. People outside the church, I would rather take them to hear Charlie than anybody else in the UK.
And he wasn't joking.
That's completely ridiculous.
This all comes as a shock to Mackesy, which is understandable given his life story.
We had kind of religious things at school, and I hated it. We sang about God, but I didn't like God. I didn't think he existed, but if he did, I didn't like him.
How would you have described or defined a Christian?
Oh, someone who pretends to be good and judges people, and believes in an invisible friend that they've created.
After that strange yet profound encounter with Oh Happy Day, Mackesy moved to New Orleans, immersing himself in black gospel music and jazz.
And I wanted to say to my friends, there's a spirit behind this that is incredible. It's so full of life. Look at it. Look at these people. Look what they believe. Look what it does to them.
Mackesy sees his art foremost as a way to introduce God to the people he loves. Like Prodigal Daughter for a friend who struggled with bipolar disorder.
You know, if you try to explain in words like, oh, God loves you, or you're loved, they don't really carry any meaning at all. To be held is somewhere she always wanted. So I said, this is what God is like.
Mackessy's art is also a record of God's presence in his own life.
I really wanted to play the piano, but I was really rubbish. And for me, the angel represents the voice of God saying, I'm with you, I love you, we'll go there together, I'll help you with this, you're not alone.
And this painting, simply titled Known.
But there was one day when I was on my bike crossing a bridge in London, and it lasted about 11 seconds. But it was this kind of, you're known, you're loved, this God exists and he loves you, he knows you, you're known, you're fully known, you're fully known. Warts, darkness. You don't have to pretend to be anything.
John Jessup, CBN News, London.
A full-scale replica of Noah's Ark is set to make a 5,000-mile journey across the Atlantic Ocean.
It will travel on a barge from its home in the Netherlands all the way to Brazil, with the goal of allowing hundreds of thousands of more people to experience the life and story of Noah. The voyage will be live streamed on arkofnoah.org. It took 4 years to build the 400-foot reproduction, and it's been on display since 2012, featuring interactive tours for visitors inside. In Brazil, new tour experiences will be added using virtual and augmented reality.
I want to go see that. I would love to see this.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Definitely. God is giving people all around the world a chance to turn to Him.
Absolutely.
He doesn't want anyone to be turned away.
That's His grace.
He wants people to turn to Jesus.
That's His grace.
That's all for this edition of the CBN News Showcase. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Stay up to date with CBN News through Facebook and Twitter. God bless. Have a wonderful day.